Hey there, emerging expat! You're tuned in to Let's Move to Portugal. I'm Victoria from Expats Everywhere's podcast, and I have the distinct honor of bringing you, YouTube travelers, and our resident of Portugal experts, Expats Everywhere's Josh and Kaylee. Each week they'll inspire, they'll educate, and they'll accompany you on your journey to Portuguese residency. This week on Let's Move to Portugal, John, a financial advisor, discusses 3 different possible scenarios due to the recent changes in administration. He also includes a bonus scenario that has many people concerned. Stay tuned to find out how these scenarios can affect you as an American. Editor's note, because this episode is time sensitive, there will not be a weekly welcome for this week.
Since January 20th, there have been a lot of changes that have happened, both politically and in the markets. John, we really need to dig in to find out how we can advise people or clear up some of the things that are happening in the market and hopefully guide them in the right direction. So tell us, what has happened since that day in January 2025?
So thank you, Josh. As always great to ride shotgun with you here on your show. It is a wild time. When I hear that word advise, I always think about like the serious nature of my work. I don't take any of what we do lightly. And I just want to say that before we say anything about what's happening in the world today. I don't have any position on politics. I mean, we all know that I'm from San Francisco, California, so that comes with a certain sort of, I think, slant to things. So just
Sure.
to say that. But you know, the new administration, the Trump and JD Vance administration, has come in and tried to make some sweeping changes. I think the most change that's ever been attempted, just short of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. To be honest, they're just trying to remake a lot of the government infrastructure, and in doing that, they have allowed the Department of Government Efficiency, or the DOGE, and Elon Musk to assist them with a broad swath of cost-cutting measures. And a lot of that is aimed at sort of gutting these government infrastructure elements. And so they're just basically firing lots of folks. There was an email that went out that was a lot like the email that Elon Musk sent to the Twitter employees when he came into Twitter, to all government employees, regardless of their department, offering to buy them out and lay them off voluntarily, so that we could just immediately come in and just cut just a ton of cost in government infrastructure. And so that's probably the most significant element of what's gone on so far, as well as a number of, and again, we're dealing with limited information, but there are a number of government agencies that are just being phased out very quickly.
Okay. Well, you and I over the past week have been getting a lot of emails and fielding a lot of questions from people that are concerned. I mean, obviously, Kaylee and I are in kind of the realm of content creation for people that are looking to move abroad or already are. And there are people that are worried about their money. Where does this come from? Like, what does Elon Musk have to do with people's personal bank accounts?
Well, what Elon, and again, we have to be careful with not expanding the conversation because it can get very large. But Elon and the Department of Government Efficiency was specifically brought into government by the Trump administration to cut all kinds of costs out of the government. And so that is, I think, relevant because the government's role in finances is front and center. You know, it's the regulator for the financial markets. So it makes the markets move smoothly. It corresponds with the Federal Reserve, the head of the Treasury, Jay Powell. It sort of works with the executive branch and with Congress to ensure that there is sort of like there's a grown-up in the room, for lack of a better way to put it, so that things can function smoothly. And so when you think about the government as a regulatory entity, having parts of it be just broken up quickly could introduce a lot of issues. It could unleash a number of consequences that we need to be very mindful of. I don't think that we have to be maybe super worried, although it is concerning, the rate of change that's being forced into the system, like really quickly. And so that's what I think is our job to talk about when we talk about finances. And then talking about expatriates, oh my goodness, like we are already talking to a group of people who may have, a sort of bias on
Hmm.
this issue, and so yeah. So do we worry about other things, about portability of money, about how it affects, maybe your retirement savings? Because I know that we have a lot of folks that are able to expatriate that are retiring. Yeah, yeah, we get concerned. We start to think about whether there's going to be some serious consequences.
Would this even bleed into things like the foreign exchange rate? Because right now we're sitting at what is, an average high where the dollar's trading to the euro about $1.05 or so, in that
Hmm.
range, to the euro. And typically we trade at kind of a wider gap where the
Hmm.
dollar isn't as close to parity to the euro. So should people be concerned about this?
I that is such an interesting point. It's actually going to strengthen the dollar for a period of time, because, well, without getting too deep into this subject once again, but like the dollar is stronger in periods of time where the U.S. economy is dealing at a premium, and it is going to be dealing at a premium in case we continue along this path of tariffs. So whenever we enact a
Mhm.
tariff on goods that are coming into the country, then that is inherently better for the domestic production of goods. So people that are producing goods from within the country are going to be at a slight advantage, or at an advantage to the extent that tariffs are being put on to the import of foreign goods. So that is actually going to increase the value of US goods that are domestically consumed. It'll increase the value of dollars. It makes it more difficult to do foreign trade. But anyways, as far as the dollar is concerned, it will have a strengthening effect on the dollar as long as there are not downstream consequences that make the U.S.
Mhm.
economy um, less strong.
Worse off. Yeah.
Yeah. So if the U.S. economy weakens, then that could have some problems, but that's going to be later. That's sort of that's a consequential effect that is at this point still speculative.
Okay. You have three potential scenarios that you'd like to share with our audience about what could happen or what will happen during this kind of administration change. What are
Yeah.
those three scenarios? What should we know about these things?
So the scenarios that you're referring to sort of capture the outcomes that we think are uh, possible, given all of this change that's being brought into the U.S. system. And so what they represent is sort of the acceptance and success of the changes that seem to be um, beginning today. And so what we're thinking about is the introduction of the sort of the Department of Governmental Efficiency and the elimination of a lot of the regulatory environment in the United States. And so
Hmm.
we wonder about, like, what might that trigger in terms of politics and in terms of economics. And so we have three scenarios that might occur with regards to it. So the first is there's like a full scale backlash against this slate of change that's being promoted, down to a sort of like hybrid of acceptance slash pushback. And then there's like a third last scenario where we have sort of like, this is the other end of the spectrum. There's like a full on change to a different style of government altogether. And this is what we're kind of we're going to be rolling out in even a webinar format soon. Is how far will things change, and
Hmm.
what kind of issues might that bring to us?
Okay. So looking at the full scale backlash, what does this look like? Is it like legal challenges? Is it political challenges from the other side of the aisle?
Hmm.
Like when I hear backlash, I mean that's kind of what I hear. Or is it like people in the streets revolting?
No, it's more the system,
Okay.
actually. and so that's what really makes this interesting is we see sort of like the Trump-led charge to just really strip down government, pushing the backlash to that would be the system itself and all of the sort of the framework, the regulatory framework, the people within it, pushing back and saying, hold on now, like we're going to have legal challenges to the dissolution of various departments within the government. We're going to see different policies that the Trump administration, as well as the DOGE, putting forward. We're going to see sort of people trying to reverse a lot of these policies coming in. Basically, we're going to see the incoming administration and its tent of people being stymied and being pushed back on, and that's not awesome for the sense, just for the simple fact that it's just going to be a bunch of just choking in every direction. Like you're just going to see gridlock of every conceivable kind. And yes, there probably will be there'll be a lot of social unrest as a consequence of all of these scenarios. But in this backlash scenario, you'll see just a lot of unrest, and it will make us look like the gang that couldn't shoot straight as a
Mm,
country. Everything is just going to look like chaos.
okay.
And I know that people think that like the administration getting everything that it wants will look like chaos, but that's a different flavor of chaos. I'm
Okay.
talking about a house sort of divided against itself
Mm.
completely, and everybody just sort of kind of at odds with one another.
And does that impact the way that Americans will be perceived abroad, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, all of this is going to impact it, but that scenario where everything just gets completely just jammed up
Mm.
is going to cause the world to. Yeah, I think in Europe there is this tendency for Europeans to sort of sometimes they have a little cheeky schadenfreude about what's happening in the U.S. And that would be what I would think we would see. People would be like, well, you tried this thing and it's not working, and and it's going to be a problem for you. But it's probably going to be also accompanied with a sense of relief because it will mean that business as usual will gradually reassert itself as the incoming administration's policies don't find their target and things don't get sliced up and diced up and change wholesale. So there will be kind of like this moment, just like any fight, where there's a fight, and then after, it's going to be like, well, yeah, we thought that there would be a massive change, and it's not happening. So it'll just be an expensive experiment.
Okay. How long do you suspect that this kind of experiment would last?
hmm Well, we're probably going to know about until the midterm elections. There is always this sort of initial period during every new presidency where the incoming administration can get everything that they want in a way.
Okay.
Like there
Okay.
is going to be, there's going to be conflict, but the truth is the Republicans enjoy a solid majority right now,
Mm.
and until there is any chance for a critical response, which would be the midterm elections, we're,
Hmm.
we're going to see this initial phase be just lots of change,
Okay.
and mostly uncontested, in the sense that the Republican majorities will give the administration the fuel that it needs to move forward with their direct approach.
Okay. So in this scenario A, where it's full scale backlash, what are some of the, I guess, market reactions to this that could impact people moving or living
So
abroad?
yeah, well, this will probably be less impactful for folks that are moving or living abroad
Okay.
because it will basically mean total gridlock. And so total gridlock means that the rate of change will slow down to a crawl. And so they'll probably just, need to deal with more the social element of it, of people thinking
Okay.
that we're kind of dumb. Like,
Right.
but that this scenario represents the least amount of actual change.
I feel like we
So
deal with that anyways. People thinking we're kind of
exactly.
dumb. So,
Yeah, people do. They do. They don't see us as inherently just better. That's all from within. That's what we oftentimes bring to the world. So people
yeah.
are just gonna go, yeah, you guys, you just You thought that you could try something totally wacky, and so that will be what we're faced with.
Okay. Is there anything else that we need to know about scenario A before we move on to scenario B?
I think scenario A is depending upon your stance on the political spectrum. It's likely to be. I mean, let's just face it. A lot of folks that are moving to Portugal, especially, are moving to a socialist environment, and so uh, they're probably going to prefer this scenario of the three that we might consider
Yep.
because this is more business as usual. Okay,
Okay.
so that's it's a highly inefficient scenario, but it is the least impactful over the long term.
Okay. So scenario B, this like partial downsizing and partial resist.
Well, scenario B, if we're looking at like the spectrum of changes, is sort of like the medication works. If the medication was something that we wanted, it works, but it's not a wholesale change.
Hmm.
Okay. Some people might even prefer scenario B if they're of the mind that the incoming administration has got a point. Okay.
Okay.
Like a lot of people do believe that the Trump administration is coming from a place of some reason that the government does have a lot of inefficiency. There is a lot of exploitation that's occurring from within because special interest groups have gotten into bed with, a lot of these agencies. And so
Hmm.
scenario B is where you have this legislative pushback that occurs, just like scenario A, but that pushback actually causes the current administration's agenda to become partially enacted. And so I think that this would be sort of a healthy response in a way, because if you buy that the incoming agenda has some validity to it, you will see only the most agreed upon aspects of their agenda be enacted. So we've already seen, for example, a bring down of what was that department called? Uh, well, there's diversity, equity,
USAID.
inclusion. There's USAID. Thank you.
Hmm.
There are some like sort of easy targets, we'll call them, that the administration has already sort of taken down.
Hmm.
And so some might say that was the dry brush that's been cleared out, and maybe that was to the good. But we won't see the government going just like full bore, sort of hollowing out most of the institutions. You get a sort of partial effect. And to answer the first question that you had that I think is relevant is, how does that affect us, especially if we're
Hmm.
moving abroad? This is probably the best scenario from the sense that we will be seen as sort of following through on things that we believe that need to happen as a government. This is the sort of
Okay.
checks and balances situation where you see the executive branch taking full advantage of its mandate and its privilege to make all
Mm.
these changes, but you don't see them getting sort of carried away, I guess. That you won't see them going like, okay, well, that's great, and let's do more, and let's do more, and let's take it all the way. This would probably this is the most probable scenario, by the way, is what we
Okay.
think from within our firm, is that the government will do what it seems intent on doing right now. It will slash a lot of things up. But the economic impact is that we will maybe get a little bit of a leaner cost structure within the government. That's the hope, anyways. Is that by taking out some of these fatted cows, sorry, that maybe things actually do see some improvement.
But what does that mean for people? I mean, okay, that sounds like it's good for the government that we're getting leaner, we're running leaner, but how does that kind of trickle down to the person that's looking at, retiring soon, or they've already retired and they're already living abroad, and how that affects uh their portfolio or whatever their pension is?
hmm Well, so it should be said that all of these scenarios, once again, are only going to be felt. Their impact will only be felt in the fullness of time, right? And so, if there is indeed some massive cost cutting as a result of all this restructuring that's being proposed and being carried out, then it will over time have a positive impact. I
Okay.
mean, everybody in the world is sort of watching the United States um, sort of curiously in the sense that we can't balance our budget. And
Mm.
that's just been that's been a problem literally for decades. And so the premise here is that we need to get back to a balanced state, a more balanced state. And again, the proposal is that that is what all of this is aimed at, is sort of stripping out the gunk. And so for individuals that are retired, maybe that means that Social Security is restored to a more solvent path. So that's a net positive.
Okay.
This could mean that the government itself is restored to a sort of a more balanced state with the way that we balance our budget. So it could have a positive, lasting impact. Um, the downside, of course, is that uh, a lot of people are saying that governmental entities that are a net positive to the Republic of the United States are going to be eliminated, and there could be social consequences. But on the financial side of
Okay.
things, I don't think that it hurts as much. And if you're moving abroad, maybe those social consequences don't even really affect you anyways, so might not hurt
Right.
you.
Right. Okay. That clears quite a bit up. I do have a question regarding Social Security since you brought it up. Now, I feel like I grew up in a generation where our parents continued to tell us that Social Security wasn't going to be a thing by the time I got to retirement age. So I grew up in the 80s. And is that the current trend? And is this something that could reverse that? You said that there could be a strengthening of a resolvency in Social Security.
hmm
What does that mean?
Well, so that's an awesome point. As a financial planner, all of our financial plans that we create for people assume that Social Security will be there. When in fact, we've been told, I forget, it's the OECD, the Office of, there's a budgetary office that's responsible for the Social Security Fund. That has
Okay.
told us that it will, in fact, run out of money. At its current rate of spending, it's actually out of money now, and it's
Mm.
actually alive on IOUs. So that should be of grave concern to us all. And we're just sort of always whistling past the graveyard on this one. And so, yeah, I mean, it looks as if the Social Security Fund is not only already out of money, but here's the positive thing that they tell us. They said, okay, well, don't worry, it's fine. Once the fund runs out of money, we're going to continue to pay out on the promises of Social Security from the taxpayers, from actual tax revenues
Ah.
every year, which is weird. It's like saying to your spouse, "Don't worry that our savings are exhausted because we're just going to
Mm.
be working forever, and so we'll always be able to pay our bills, but just out of our paychecks." And I don't think that that's a huge win. That's sort of
Mm.
telling everybody that we're going to be living hand to mouth in the Social Security Fund, and that's scary. So what all of this is aimed at, this sort of hollowing out, is at restoring solvency to so much of our current entitlements programs. And the Social Security has become one of our largest Social Security and our debt service are our
Mm.
largest expenses, and
23%
defense.
or something like that for the debt
Yes,
service. Yeah.
yes. So when your
Okay.
debt service and your retirement plan are of like the most expensive aspects of your government, of your budget, like that's problematic. And so that is actually the sense with which all of this has been put to work, is to try and
Okay.
strip out all of that fat. And so theoretically, at least, this could go a long ways towards actually restoring some balance to the Social Security Fund and to many other forms of entitlement programs, the ones that survive, anyways.
Okay. So for people that are in their retired and in their 70s, Social Security is not so much of a problem, or the lack of funds in the Social Security. I don't even what would you call it?
Yeah, it's a Social Security fund.
Social Security fund. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay. So that's not so much of a problem. People in their 50s, it's a problem. Like it's
it's a
something to be
huge problem.
concerned about. So
Yeah.
therefore, what do you do if you're in your 50s and like you just shouldn't even like worry about relying on Social Security? You need to figure
Mhm.
out other ways to prepare for retirement.
That's
Is that
right.
what I'm hearing? Okay.
That's right. It's a bit like a pension. Okay,
Mm,
like it is a pension. It's a
yeah.
publicly funded pension program,
Yep.
and if you are just completely reliant on that pension program, then that's going to be the source of your problems
Mm,
when you retire. So when I do financial planning for people, I always offer them the choice. Um, if we want to look at this, there's a scenario where it doesn't really, where we don't have that pension. And so let's just make sure that in our worst case scenario planning,
mm,
that we can plan for that and that we could be okay with that, you know?
okay.
So that
Yeah.
that is one of the ways that we have to look at things when we're being honest with ourselves about planning.
Okay. So we just took a look at scenario B, which is this kind of hybrid, partial downsizing, partial resistance. Anything else that you need to cover in scenario B before we move to scenario C?
I don't think so. I think scenario B, you're going to have a lot of people that say this is exactly what the political process was designed to do.
Okay.
Was, allow for change, but to give us a chance to digest it and to have some critical response to that
Okay.
change.
And to reiterate, you said that this was the most likely outcome as well.
Yeah, on the order of these three scenarios, I think this is the likeliest that we will see.
Okay. All right. Scenario C is going to be Doge dominance and full control. What does this look like?
Yes. Okay. Now, again, I am not trying to feed any kind of internet, you know, fear mongering. There's no fear mongering.
Yes.
Okay. So this is just a scenario in which maybe the government that's been put in right now decides to take its premise all the way.
Mm,
Maybe the administration comes in and gets everything that they want, and the things that they want start bearing some early signs of success. We see that like the forms of uh, regulation that they're trying to curb, that there's a lot of deregulation that's happening right now. Maybe
mm,
it like it makes the market spike. The market spikes. Industries that are heavily regulated right now have like a burst of speed put onto them, and everybody's excited for that. Maybe our trade tariffs have the intended effect completely, and
mm.
we see like this resurgent domestic manufacturing, and this just sort of like go America full scale situation emerges. That might in turn cause the government to go even further with the programs that it's currently introduced, and that's why we call it Doge dominance. Is as we see, like Elon Musk brought even higher into sort of key decision making arenas, and allowed to establish a sort of, what are we calling it? My partner calls it technocratic order. I hope he didn't
Okay.
pull that from some
I've heard
science fiction book.
I've heard
Uh,
this term. Yeah, yeah, I have heard the term. Okay.
uh, yeah, I mean, again, I have to expose my bias. I find this a little scary. This is a
Okay.
scenario in which we see sort of a curbing of sort of of democracy as we know it.
Okay.
You might have term limits removed, for example, and you might have people. You might have like Doge elevated to a position where they oversee the Treasury directly. There might be a sort of rollback of the autonomy of the Fed. That's been talked about by Donald Trump and his administration. He's thinking, why don't we just sort of streamline things and allow the executive branch to have direct monetary control? And that whole scenario scares the dickens out of me.
I think a
Um,
lot of people.
I think a lot of people get scared when they
Mm,
look at that. It
mm,
just really starts to make the United States look like countries that we don't tend to want to be like.
Okay.
And it would undermine. So that scenario, if it happened, would look in the short term like highly jubilant, probably,
Okay.
because especially the wealthy would grow even wealthier, right? But like it would exacerbate the effects of income inequality that we're already seeing, because all of our sort of technocratic leaders would become sort of de facto oligarchs. You know, a lot of people think
Okay.
of this as like the oligarch scenario,
Sure.
because the streamlining would leave an even smaller minority of highly wealthy individuals in charge, and they would be in charge for life, and there would be, there would be a lack of social mobility. This would be terrible, to be honest,
Would
because long term it would destroy the dollar and its current sort of high status as a reserve currency. The world relies on us to play kind of an open game, and this would shut that down, and ultimately we think create a severe decline in U.S. influence in the world.
do you think that this would be done fully intentionally, or do you think it is being done fully intentionally, or do you think it'd be like, okay, things are going well, let's push this a little further. Hey, things are going even better, let's push this a little further. Do you see it like heading in that direction, or do you think that there's a lot of intentionality up front from these actors within government?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. Actually, that's a question that we all
Or
talk
is that the
about.
concern?
That's the concern. Yes, that's what we talk
Yeah.
about among friends when we're just
Yeah.
letting our hair down.
Yeah.
As a financial advisor, this is sort of off of my normal slate of what I want to talk about. But yeah, you
Sure.
think about, like, I think that there is this will to just, yeah, baby, let's just push it all the way.
Mm.
Even among the founding fathers, there were some founding fathers who disagreed that your average person should be participating in the political
To
process.
vote. Yeah. Mm.
They would go, you shouldn't just trust any person. We need
Hmm.
only the trained professionals. And we know at that time it was uh, it was not women and it was not minorities.
Mm.
The people in power would say, let's let the people that know what they're doing make all these decisions.
Mm.
And I find that, again, now I'm just sharing my bias. I find that just awful, because there are going to be a whole, like, I think the majority of people they aren't born into a privileged class, are going to find themselves suddenly stripped of whatever nominal power that we afford them now. So that's problematic, I think. And I don't know. I know that there's some argument around that, but yeah, I think there is an intent to do this, and we hopefully will subject that to examination in the
Right.
public forum, is what we all hope.
So earlier you mentioned there would be a weakening of the dollar. How would a weakening of the dollar impact people that are already living abroad or considering this move?
Oh my goodness. Well, if there's a weakening of the dollar, let's just keep it contained to the
Mm.
weakness of the U.S. currency. Um, if the individual in question had all of their money in the United States, then for sure that currency being weakened would, immediately reduce our spending power in the rest of the world.
Okay.
So you're just poorer as a function of every loss of value of the U.S. dollar against other currencies.
Okay. Are there any other things that you want to cover in scenario C before we move on to like what are the things people can do to protect themselves against the different scenarios?
Well, this is a public service announcement to you. If you don't vote or participate in the political process at all, then I'm sorry, but you gotta. So even if you're not living in the United States, if you're a registered citizen, you can and should still vote.
Mm.
Because if you don't want any of these scenarios to happen, but you don't vote, then sorry, but you're kind of part of the problem on that. Like,
Mm.
we all have to participate in this very public debate. So that's all. And
Okay.
scenario C will happen. What is that saying? That, like, it's not the evil men that cause the world to become a worse place. It's when good men, we should say good people. When good people don't act, if you don't act, then you don't get to have a say because you
Okay.
have basically not said anything. So that's
Okay.
that's the final thing here. Is it's just because you want to move to another country doesn't mean that you bow out of the conversation altogether.
Right. Okay. So what are then some key risks and some opportunities across different asset classes so that people can, maybe hedge their bets one way or the other, or just prepare for this?
Well, there is not really any evidence to support the idea that long-term rates of return on any asset class will be radically different. I mean,
Okay.
we're like, it just needs to be said that all of these scenarios are sort of speculative and all outside of the known world. And so in the known world, stocks outperform bonds. Bonds are more dull but inherently predictable. And then you have a whole slate of other alternative assets, including cryptocurrencies and other things. And so I have to say, consult with a professional and really think about what all this means. As much as I love these debates that we have online, it's a fairly rigorous subject that you should really think about, like, seriously. Um,
Okay.
but that being said, if you think that this situation is going to get out of hand in any way whatsoever, you need to sort of back away slowly from the higher risk categories of investments. So higher risk being, like investments in U.S. stocks. Like, just think about your rate of participation if you believe that there's imminent challenge
Hmm.
headed our way. And then all the way down to cash being the most boring, most predictable asset. But because we're talking in an environment where a lot of people are cross border,
Yeah.
diversify your cash as well. So
Yeah.
don't earn
You've got to buy other currencies.
yeah,
Yeah.
you got to have other currencies. If you
Mm.
believe that there is a imminent political snafu, you should be diversifying on that front as well, up to and including having a little bit of cryptocurrency, up to and including having some gold.
Hmm.
People laugh about it. You can go to Costco right now and you can buy big bricks of gold. Like, maybe you do
I've
that.
seen it. Yeah. I've seen
Go
it.
in and buy some. Yeah, isn't that crazy?
It is crazy.
It's wild, but do that. Get your emergency fund built. Have at least a year's worth of funds, maybe in a multi-currency situation, set to the side so that you don't have to worry about the situation getting completely out of hand.
Okay. I know that you're not a currency expert, but just kind of having your pulse on what's happening globally since you do live abroad, what currencies do you recommend that people should have a bit of a holding in or portfolio of?
No, I'm not an expert. And if you want to meet experts, go and do your research. They're out there, or you can talk to me. As I've said to you many times, you have an amazing audience of folks that reach out
Yeah.
on occasion. I'm happy to give them some referrals to folks who are FX specialists. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that said, where you live is where you should have your emergency fund. So
Yeah.
sometimes
Agreed.
people make the point that, like, you can get higher yields on US cash, money
Sure.
markets are better, treasuries are better. But, like, come on, man. Like, if you live in Europe, you need to have euros.
Yeah.
You need to have a year's worth of euros. If you live in Russia, you got rubles. Like, you have to have the currency of where you live, and you have to think about how liquid that currency is. So
Yeah.
that's number one. Number two, then you look at where you can get the most reliable, stable rate of return, and in a well-regulated environment.
Mm.
Right? There's countries who have horrible track records for being easily accessible, and sometimes they put capital controls on their money. Stay away from those countries. So the United
Like
States
who?
is, like who? I feel terrible saying these things out loud, but like Argentina has had a really bad track record. They have
Okay.
nationalized their money many times. China. Um,
Yeah.
Hopefully, we don't become one of these countries at some point in time, although I don't think that's possible at all at this juncture. Um, who else? I'm trying to think. Yeah, there are just some governments that regularly impose capital restrictions on its citizens, and we would have to look those up. But of course, you
Okay.
wouldn't go to those countries ever. especially not on purpose, to just put funds towards them. So for the most part, it's the US dollar. The US
Okay.
dollar at this moment in time is the world's reserve currency for a reason. It's been and should we expect continue to be the
Mm-hmm.
most stable currency, and most international trade is done in it for that reason. So
Okay.
still us.
So
Yeah.
yeah, to summarize that point there, you're saying to have at least a year of living expenses in a foreign currency. What about precious metals? Like, do you have any kind of guidelines or recommendations on how much value in their portfolio someone should have of precious metals?
hmm Yeah, actually, we do. We actually own and operate a real asset portfolio that includes precious metals. You've got, gold, tin, iron, um, as well as energy, things of that nature. So that's like an asset class, and we always have
Mm.
around 5% at any given moment, give or take a certain amount in real assets, because it's a great hedge.
Mhm.
It's a good hedge. You continue to need to have energy and materials to make the world go round, and so
Yeah.
that's part of your approach to investment. What's really interesting is increasingly people are either going directly to Costco and buying that gold and putting it into a little vault,
Yeah.
maybe on their boat, where they also have their bullets and they have their, you know, I mean, I've
May or
met
may
these
not have a tin
people.
hat on that
They
boat, but
may
yeah.
or may not be fashioning a hat so they can protect themselves from, from the government mind control. Um, I don't know. Um, but seriously, like if you have the means to, it might not hurt to have a little bit of gold for yourself. But yeah, and then cryptocurrencies.
Mm.
Increasingly, people are seeing crypto. I mean, that is the premise of cryptocurrency, especially for sort of like the hardcore ideologically pure people. It's like crypto exists outside of any government,
Yeah.
and so if cryptocurrency has a value at all, then we consider it worth having, and then maybe keeping it in a cold storage, right? So keeping it in sort of like an offline wallet,
Yeah.
so that you can have that come what may. And so a lot of people say that that's maybe sort of like the third wheel of currency that's evolving. That's definitely a situation that's evolving right now.
And 5% on that as well, or less, or more?
Less, I
Less.
think
Okay. I
less, but
yeah.
that's me. I'm showing my age. I'm like, really? Like, what is it really money? I'm one of these types of people who,
That's where I sit with it.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
we're about what? Like, I'm gonna be turned 46
I'm
tomorrow.
41. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I don't know. I don't believe in it. Can I spend a crypto coin on Chinese takeout tomorrow? I don't know. I think you can actually in San Francisco, but I don't know. I don't. So I don't like to speculate on that.
Yeah.
It is in my mind entirely speculative. I say all apologies to those clients of mine who are professionals, because some people have obviously benefited massively from
Sure.
involvement in cryptocurrencies, and maybe it's just sour grapes. I wish that I had the foresight to buy about. Yeah,
Yeah, but
like
some people have also lost their butts. I
I
mean,
know.
so there's two sides to that crypto coin. Let me ask
Oh
you
my goodness.
let me ask you about real estate because you've not touched on real estate. How could real estate be impacted? Because many of the people that we
Yeah.
speak with that are of retirement age, a lot of them actually have multiple houses. They've used real estate as a vehicle to fuel their retirement. So could real estate be impacted?
Yeah. See, I'm showing my bias. I've spent so much of my professional life managing stocks and bonds and things. But
Mm,
yeah, real estate is, of course, central. Even if none of this stuff that we've just talked about comes to pass, you should have real estate in your portfolio. Um, First of all, the one that you live in, right? So that
okay.
you could nail down your fixed costs, your
Okay.
sort of shelter cost, as they call it.
Hmm.
Some people believe that you should just rent until the end, because you get higher rates of return on all the other asset classes. I'm not one of those. I think human
Okay.
nature being what it is, I think you should own your primary residence. And then there are some folks who become like, I think of them as like the Monopoly guy, right? They get Boardwalk Park Place and they put properties up on them. And if you are a professional with real estate and you can operate properly on leverage and
Mm,
be a great landlord, either like personally or you have management
team.
firms, yeah, you have a team. It
Yeah.
can be highly lucrative, and it also stabilizes your income because you don't have to count on withdrawing funds or, as we've just described, the fickle winds of fate in the stock markets. So
Right.
if you have real estate, it could be amazing. It's a whole other thing. Like, because if you
Hmm.
move to Portugal, as we've talked about, and you
Hmm.
have income coming to you in Portugal, well, then what have you got? You've got a whole other set of issues like taxes that you have to think about, income streams from properties.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's
It does
that's a whole
complicate
other.
things.
It does. Yeah, it does.
Hmm.
I even have a client who does currency lending, and I think he's nuts. He's like, I lend out money at 25%, John. Like, why would I ever want to do anything else? And I'm like, well, if those people don't give you your money back, then you break their legs. Well, I don't know.
Right. Right.
They always pay me back, right? And so, like, there are sort of like these sort of embedded levels of comfort with different asset classes that people
Yeah.
have, and why wouldn't they? Because if that's what they do every day, then they should keep doing it and do it well.
Okay. So let's kind of summarize a bit of what investors can do in these scenarios here. So
Okay.
as things play out, let's kind of give a little more concrete information. What can investors do? Because we just went through each asset class, but what can people do?
Yeah. So first off, consult with your friendly neighborhood financial planner and put a plan together.
Mm,
Because if you have a plan, then you're more likely to succeed at things, I think, or at
yeah,
least have a level of comfort with the
for
plan
sure.
that you're creating. And then you should be balanced with regards. Well, first off, make sure you have your emergency fund. If you don't have an emergency fund, then none of the rest of the stuff you should be thinking about. Make sure you have
Okay.
like a year's worth
Build
of
it
living
first.
expenses. Exactly. That's your base. Having your
Hmm.
living expenses in place, know your living situation is secure. So own your home that you live in, right? Or I would say own your home. If you really can't do that, then the rest of this planning process is tough too.
Okay.
And then keep your investments in a reasonable portfolio. Um, and by reasonable, I mean sort of globally diversified, not in any one type of asset. And to the extent that you believe that government upheaval is about to happen, make sure that you have your cash available and that it's in the country that you live in. But I don't think that you should believe that. I think you should be
Okay.
reasonable and you should just keep everything like really balanced until you receive some real evidence that serious upheaval is about to change your
I mean,
life.
is this like the fourth turning type of serious upheaval?
Yeah, man. I don't know how fourth turning ish you want to be because I don't personally think that that's the case.
Okay.
I think that we sort of as humans all want to believe that things are more wild than they are.
Mm.
But maybe there's something to that. So
Well, you do have this scenario X that I think it'd be great to let people know about because it is one of the things that has worked people up into a frenzy. So, can you tell us what kind of scenario X is and what people can do to safeguard themselves from that?
oh, you mean scenario X where there's like a full shutdown and the U.S. just becomes its own sort of island and doesn't want to play nice anymore?
Yeah, I mean this is a concern that we're seeing online. People worried that that the government's going to prevent its citizens from moving the U.S. dollar out of banks, and like
Yeah. Okay.
so. Then what?
Well,
How do you prepare for
let's
that? The
let's
doomsday.
let's let's go there. So I think that your audience is probably the furthest along the path towards becoming sort of nation agnostic, right?
Mm.
Becoming country agnostic. The fact is like every world war that we've been faced with has seen a number of people showing up in Portugal because it is one of the most boring places, one of the most geopolitically inert places
Mm.
that you could end up in. And so do that. Diversify your passports. So make sure that you have a passport in more than just one country. Your home country being the United States, in my case. See if you can diversify or at least get your residency started in another country.
Mhm.
Um, that means that if suddenly we get like some sort of, I don't know, Iron Curtain of, gosh, it sounds so scary even thinking the US could do something Iron Curtain like. But
Mm.
that's what we're talking about. Just make sure that you have your structure set up on more than just one continent so that you could shut the power down. There's a big move in the United States for individuals that want to sort of, they're preppers, right? They're just like, there's total DIY prepper folks who are like, if I could go off the grid entirely tomorrow, can I? And that's what we're really talking about. Is like Portugal would be a great place to be a prepper because we have the most sunlight here. Like if you could go off the grid entirely and get like, can you imagine that? Like you get full
Yeah.
solar panels, get gray water, yeah, you have a couple different passports, yeah, like that's like the farthest end. You made me go there, but like there is a world in which you do that sort of thing. And I think a country like Portugal would be a great place to do that because there seems to be less of a political will here to sort of reach out and harass and control people. But see, now I'm really going into just like my personal beliefs. I don't have anything to back that up. Um,
Well, I feel like you just described, Bear Grylls, Jason Bourne, and Martha Stewart. If they all came together and became one, you move out to somewhere in Portugal and you just do your own thing. Multiple
yes.
passports, knitting your own socks and planting your own
Yeah.
garden.
Yeah, plant your own
Amazing.
garden. Exactly. You got that boat, docked over there, and the boat's all gassed up, and it's
Ready
got
to
that.
go.
Yeah, we already talked about the little safe with a bunch of gold and some guns. Um,
Okay.
yes, that's out on the fringe there. Um, but who's to say that you're crazy if you're on the fringe? Maybe it's not a question of being crazy. It's being,
You'll be ready.
yeah,
So
you'll be
we
ready.
are going to put some links to different resources that people can use. Whether people are really concerned about these things happening or just moderately, but like you said, ways that people can prepare. And I think many people that are moving to, especially Portugal, but other European countries, do have an eye on getting a second passport. So it's like, there you go. That gives a level of fluid, like, movement
Hmm.
geographically anyways. Okay.
Yeah, it's all about
Um,
options, man. Um, you know,
yeah. So
like
you've got more to say on your webinar that's coming up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a link to your landing page so people can sign up for the webinar, but also if people want a free 15-minute call with you, you've given us a special link for that, which I'll have in the description section. Any last advice you can give us before we wrap it up?
I don't think so. I think you've already done so much to educate your audience. That's all I want to do too is provide folks with the sort of the tonic of knowledge. On the other hand, don't get too crazy with it, guys. Just unplug every once in a while. Go for a walk on the beach.
Enjoy
That's
life.
that's my happy place. Yeah, enjoy your life.
Yeah.
Like a lot of this stuff, I hate to say it because I live in this sphere of information, but a lot of it can sort of like get so heavy and make us feel like it's all going to happen in a minute,
Yeah.
and it's not probably. So I urge you to just enjoy your life, breathe, spier, inspire, and if you can't do that, then join hands with me and let's figure out a plan.
Awesome. Well, again, links in the description section below for you all to check out if you're interested in talking to John or hearing more that he has to say on this particular topic. John, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Be well.
Take care, my man. Bye.
All right, you too.